From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
Democratic candidate Jorge Elorza won a convincing victory over independent Vincent Buddy Cianci to become the next mayor of Providence. Now the 37-year-old former housing court judge is starting to get his team assembled and tapped Brett Smiley, his former primary opponent, to be the city's director of administration. Elorza, who beat Cianci 52-45, has his hands full, mending a politically divided city and financially stretched thin. This week on Newsmakers, Mayor-elect Jorge Elorza.
Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Joining me on the panel, as always, WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi. Good morning, everyone, and Mayor-elect, congratulations on the win.
Thank you so much.
Congrats.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
You won November 4th, obviously. It's been 10 days since.
It must feel like forever.
I was going to say, it must feel like 10 months since.
It really does.
What's the last 2 weeks or so been like for you?
So, we spent all of about maybe a couple of hours celebrating, and then it was right back to work the very next day. Making sure, there's no shortage of people to thank. And of course, I'm so appreciative of all the people that helped out on the campaign. So I've been calling a lot of people, seeing a lot of folks, and thanking them for all of their support. And internally, what we're talking about is how do we engage all the people that have been involved in the campaign and in the process. There's so much optimism, there's so much goodwill and good energy, and our challenge is making sure that we continue to tap into it because. From the beginning of the campaign, it was about one Providence, bringing people together. And in the administration, it's going to be the same thing. How do we continue to bring every part of the city together? And that's the challenge right now in the transition. Everyone wants to go out there and continue campaigning and knocking on doors. I've had so many volunteers tell me that, without doors to knock in the evenings, they don't know what to do with themselves.
But take a break. How about take a break for a minute?
It's not in their nature. But we're going to find ways to continue to get people involved. And, I'm really looking forward through the transition and then the administration to make sure we have those avenues so that people's voices are continually being heard in the decisions that we make.
People are going to wonder, whether it's you or Gina Raimondo or someone else, as a candidate, aren't you just frankly exhausted after, those were some long, tough campaigns you all went through. Do you wish you could kind of go on vacation for a little while or something, take a little break?
Maybe to a certain extent. My entire team after the election, they were telling me, Jorge, you got to take a vacation, you got to take a break, and I refused. I've worked every single day since the election. I'll tell you, Ted, it's not work and it's not a job. This is a privilege to do. And I feel as though I owe everyone who worked on the campaign the courtesy of giving them a call and saying thank you personally. So that's very enjoyable. And beyond that, I'm just so excited to continue to tap into all of that optimism that exists throughout the city. And eventually I'll take a break. I think after Thanksgiving I'm going to take a couple days off. But it's been we've been right back at it, and we're excited to get going.
I noticed that you are going to be the 38th mayor of the city of Providence. Is that going to be your age when you're sworn in?
It will be. Well, yeah, I turn 38 in a couple of weeks.
All right. Well, early happy birthday to you.
Thank you so much.
So we have to talk about. Tim mentioned it in the opening. Buddy Cianci. Obviously, you said, and many of your supporters felt even more strongly, it was not good, to say the least, that Buddy Cianci was running again. Yet, he's only less than a decade out of jail for corruption, and he got 45% of the vote. What does that? And I know you're going to want to say, "Oh, I'm for all people," but honestly, what does that tell you about the city? That 45% of the voters wanted to give Buddy Cianci back the keys to City Hall, despite what a judge said and a jury was, the public trust that he betrayed that.
I think that more than anything, it says that people want a new direction in the city. We saw that in the primary. We see it again in the general election. People want a change of direction, just new ideas, new faces, and in many ways he positioned himself in that way. My campaign theme from the beginning, as you mentioned, has been about bringing people together and genuinely offering a fresh perspective, a fresh face, new ideas. And that resonated with voters throughout the campaign, and I take that to heart. That's what got us in this position, and it's a matter of continuing to get that message out there.
But there are people who feel that. Yeah, I talked to someone yesterday who said to me, he said he's going to be new, but the current mayor introduced him, and he was out campaigning with the mayor before him, David Cicilline. How do you? How do you show people there will be a new direction when they also know that you had the support of the two predecessors before you?
This, I believe, as a fundamental principle. People might have opinions in the short term, criticisms in the short term, but you can't govern and you can't make decisions responding to people's critiques, criticisms, or comments, whatever it would be. I feel fundamentally committed to this point that if we do our job well over the next months, over the next years, come re-election, the people will re-elect you. If you do your job and we fix these schools, if we do our job and we turn around the economy, if we enhance the way that we provide city services, that's what people will ultimately base their decision on. I think that too many, frankly, elected officials in the past, mistakes that they've made is that they respond to the emerging crisis of the day, and you can't govern day to day in that way. I made it a pledge from the beginning of my campaign that we're going to think long term about everything that we do here in the city, and that's the approach that we're going to take. And so we're committed to doing this right, establishing the right foundation, engaging as many people as possible, and getting to work on day one to turn the city around.
Briefly on Buddy again, what was the phone call like election night? What did you say to him? What did he say to you?
Well, I answered. I said, Mr. Cianci, and he was very gracious. He was very gracious in defeat. And I told him that, just as with all the other mayors that have, years of collected wisdom and experience, that, I would need his advice and guidance as issues came up, just as I will reach out to every other former mayor. And he said that he wanted me to succeed, and that if he could be helpful in any way, to just reach out.
Have you talked to him since?
Not yet. It's been all of 10 days.
Yeah.
So it's just last week. But I look forward to reaching out to all the former mayors, all the elected officials throughout the city and the state. The only way to move the city forward is through relationships. Relationships with the community, relationships with leaders, and relationships with everyone throughout the city. And that's the approach that I'm going to take.
Actually, one of the things that happened in this campaign is all the municipal unions backed Buddy Cianci over you. Have you had any discussions with union leaders in the city since then, considering none of them were with you in your campaign?
Not with municipal union leaders. But I mean, it's the same thing. The decisions of who to endorse in the process, that's made by a very small group in union leadership. I'm very heartened by the fact that I had so many teachers come to me and say, I'm voting for you regardless. So, I know that I had a lot of support from a number of city employees. But still, this is about reaching out and pitching a broad tent that everyone fits under. And I said it in my speech last Tuesday that this is not going to be a campaign or an administration about, well, who was with me, who wasn't against me. Whether you voted for me or not, I'm going to be the mayor for everyone throughout the city. Because I truly believe that the only way we can move forward is by coming together, this one Providence theme. You look at our approach in the schools and engaging the entire community. We don't have, it can't be done from the top down. You look at my approach with public safety. It's about building those relationships between the community and public safety officials. You look at my approach to economic development, from the corner office to the corner store and everything in between. So this is about engaging everyone throughout the community. Whether they voted for me or not, we're going to engage them in this administration.
You brought up public safety. You have some key appointments to make. Have you decided on Public Safety Commissioner Stephen Perry yet?
I have not.
The governor-elect Gina Raimondo announced this week that Colonel Stephen O'Donnell will remain the head of the state police. That is a strong vote of confidence. She didn't wait. Does your silence mean you're on the fence? Should Commissioner Perry be dusting off his resume?
No, you shouldn't read anything into it. We're going to do an up and down review of all of City Hall, every single department by department. I'm very excited. I announced my leadership team in the transition committee. So we're gonna, in fact, we met this morning. We're gonna go through every single department and do a thorough and comprehensive evaluation, and that's when we'll make the decisions.
In that role, former Mayor David Cicilline didn't have a public safety commissioner. He, in essence, made that person himself. Is that on the table? Would you consider that, or do you think it's important to have someone in that position?
Yeah. I think everything is on the table. I'm not ruling anything out. And I tell you, as I've been looking at organizational charts at City Hall, we're not committed to doing things because that's the way they've previously been done. I feel very, very strongly about this. I committed to it during my campaign, and there's so many things here in Providence that are done for no other reason than that's the way they've always been done. And we have to bring people into City Hall that are going to take this attitude that, the fact that it's done that way, that means very little. Does it work is the real question, and can it be done better?
Do you already know something that doesn't work?
We're going to learn from best practices throughout the United States, because mayors throughout the country, they're addressing and solving many of the same problems that we're facing. We can learn from the rest of the country. Let's apply these best practices, but more than anything else, it's an attitude and an approach that things can't be done the way that they've always been done, just for that reason. We need justification going forward, and the justification has to be what's the best way to do it.
Is there anything that you've already identified as something that must be changed, just because it's been done that way for forever?
Sure, on a broad level. You talk to people in the business community, and they say that you go through the permitting process, and the permitting process is such a bear. How many developments have been abandoned or have never gotten going simply because they don't want to go through the permitting process? We will never know, but we know that it has a real impact here in the city. And that's an area that we need a new set of eyes, a fresh perspective, because we have to streamline that program continuously. And I know that Taveras' administration, that they actually improved that process, but the fact that it improved, that means very little. It's about continuous improvement, and that's the approach that we're going to take.
You mentioned Mayor Taveras. Our colleague Dan McGowan, who's done yeoman's work on your race, recently reported the city could face a budget deficit of $15 million to $24 million next year. I know these numbers are moving targets always, but what have you been told about the budget deficit the city's likely to face in your first fiscal year?
Yeah, well, I'm hearing the same things, that we could face a budget deficit of that level. But I think that the responsible thing to do is that as soon as you come into City Hall, you have to do a comprehensive review of the budget. You have to go through it line by line and figure out where exactly the city stands. So we're definitely going to do that comprehensive review. What I will also say is that I've sat down and I've spoken with Mayor Taveras a couple of times, and he and his administration, they've been entirely forthcoming with information about the budget in City Hall. So I really thank him for his commitment to making the transition as smooth as possible, and I look forward to continue working with him and his administration so that we hit the ground running on day one.
But he's acknowledged it could be in that $15 million to $24 million range?
Yeah, no one really knows, and I haven't spoken with him specifically about the deficit number, but about the process in general. They've been he and his folks have been extremely transparent and forthcoming, and we'll get down to those numbers very soon.
But people at home hear about budget deficits, they worry about their taxes. Can you take tax increases off the table to close that budget deficit, or is that a possibility?
I've said continuously that raising taxes is not an option. There are many other steps that we can take, but raising taxes is not an option.
Before we go to break, got to ask you, can you pledge that you will be Mayor of Providence, or attempt to be Mayor of Providence for 8 years, for 2 full terms?
If I have the honor of being reelected, I will be here 2 full terms.
All right, we have a lot to talk about. Our guest this week, obviously, is Mayor-elect of the city of Providence, Jorge Elorza. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. To my right is WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi, and our guest this week is Providence Mayor-elect Jorge Elorza. Again, congratulations on the victory.
Again, thank you.
All right, I want to talk to you about the PEDP. In September, the city paid HUD back $1.9 million for loans that HUD said should not have been granted. This week, my colleagues Walt Buteau, Dan McGowan reported that money is now officially paid back. Look, PEDP has been a hot mess, riddled with controversy, accountability problems. What changes, if any, are you going to make to PEDP?
Yeah. Well, we have to be strategic with PEDP funds, and I've talked about creating a revolving fund where, I've been very vocal about the women and minority-owned business situation here in the city. By ordinance, we're supposed to give 10% of city contracts to women and minority-owned businesses, but in reality, it's only about 2.5% of city contracts, which is 10% is low as it stands. 2.5% is just too low. And I've talked about creating a revolving fund where these small shops, they can access these short-term revolving loans so that they can make payroll while they're waiting 2 or 3 months to be reimbursed from the city. And these would be jobs that are created right here in the city, jobs that are accessible to our residents here in the city. And those are the kinds of ideas that we're considering for the PEDP.
Have you ever thought about shutting PEDP down? Was that ever, top of mind with all the? I mean, $2 million. That's a tough take in a financially strapped city.
Yeah.
Did that ever cross your mind?
It hasn't crossed my mind because these are funds that we get. These are federal funds that we get. Many of them come from CDBG money. So we'd have to consider whether we would lose that. But we need to. We definitely need to rethink PEDP and come up with a way that the resources that we're expending through PEDP and the loans that we're giving out, that they strategically fit into our vision going forward for the city. It has to be about what kind of jobs can we create and what kind of businesses have the potential for growth. So that's what I'm very focused on, and my economic development team. We're going to get to every aspect of economic development in the city, and that's going to be an important component of it too.
City Councilman Luis Aponte is a leading candidate to be the next council president, and a number of people were fairly stunned to learn that he also owes nearly $50,000 in fines to the Rhode Island Board of Elections. You're not a councilman, I'm sure you're going to say you're not involved, but do you think it's appropriate for someone who's been so heavily fined to get potentially a promotion?
Yeah. So. With Angel's administration and his relationship with Council President Michael Solomon, I think that everything that the city was able to do moving out of the fiscal crisis had to do with the fact that they had a very close working relationship. And my priority is making sure that whoever the city council president is, that I'm committed to working with that person, and that person is committed to working with me. I haven't gotten involved in the city council race, nor do I plan to. I stand ready to work with whoever emerges as the council president leader.
Is $50,000 in fines, though? I mean, does that strike you as a bad thing, at least?
I'll leave that to them. What I can definitely say is, of course, we all, once we declare our candidacy, we have a responsibility to file our campaign finance reports, and Councilman Aponte has recognized that, and I hope that he addresses that soon enough.
You brought up City Council President Mike Solomon. He was also your Democratic primary opponent, for people to remember. Do you see any role in your administration for him?
Absolutely, in some way or another. And I'm not making a commitment about a job or not a job, but he's been there for the past 8 years. He knows the inner workings of City Hall, and I'm going to make sure that I continue to tap into his wealth of wisdom and experience to make sure that we make better decisions in City Hall. I will say this about Council President Michael Solomon. He's been a class act throughout the campaign, and especially after the primary. We met a couple of days after the primary, and he told me, whatever you need, Judge, just let me know, I'm there. And every time I've called on him, he's been there for me. So I'll be sure to draw on his knowledge, his experience, and his wisdom.
Well, he would be the second, if you do appoint him to a position, a second appointment. You've also tapped Brett Smiley to be the Chief Operating Officer, Director of Administration. He was also a primary opponent, and then he came out and endorsed you and helped you spring to victory. You've talked a lot about fresh faces and change in the city, but some people say, look, he's the ultimate insider. Does that conflict with your message of change by appointing Brett Smiley?
No, not at all. I feel very proud. I recently appointed Tony Simon as my chief of staff, and also Representative Grace Diaz as a senior advisor for community relations. These are folks that are new to the city, and in fact, in the conversations that we're having, we're going to balance out these new, fresh faces to the city with people who have experience at City Hall. It has to be that healthy balance. And I'm very proud of the fact. I'm very proud of the team that we're building, around my administration in City Hall right now. And in the coming weeks, many folks are interested in positions. We'll go through an application and an interview process, but you can expect to see more fresh and new faces to City Hall. So I'm excited about that.
But specifically with Brett, you know how it is. You probably heard it. We certainly have. You did it because you owed him one. That's what people say. How do you respond?
So, I've said consistently, and one thing that I'm very, very proud of, I did not make one commitment about a job to one person. And going back to the primary, I sat down with Brett and I told him, Brett, he was considering stepping aside, withdrawing from the race and endorsing my campaign. I looked him in the eye and I told him, I am not promising a job. And he nonetheless made the decision. He deserves a lot of credit for that. And so over the past couple of months, we've worked together on the campaign, and I've seen how we complement each other very well, and I've seen how we work together. And he's definitely something that I'm proud to have beside me in helping to run the city.
You said, I believe, in your campaign you want more police officers in the city. Will there? And we were talking before about potential budget deficits. So will there be money in your first budget for more police officers, or is that a much longer-term goal of yours, considering the city's financial problems?
Yeah. This all requires, sitting down with the city council, with city leadership, and seeing what kind of room we have in the budget. But I think that everyone will agree that we need more police officers here in Providence. We're about 100 police officers down from our maximum of 490 years ago. So, obviously we need more of that police presence. And you mentioned, Ted, that throughout the campaign, I've talked a great deal about having more police officers live in the city. It makes such a big difference when we have the police officer with the police cruiser living right next door, and have police officers living in every corner in every neighborhood in our city. We used to have a residency requirement. We don't have it, but that just means that we have to be creative. And I've talked about bringing real estate agents into the police academy to make it as easy for them to live there. Also looking at cities such as Atlanta, Georgia. What they do is they work with private landlords and offer discounted rent to police officers so that they can live in that house. There are many approaches that we can take, but we're going to be creative, we're going to be collaborative, and we're going to give incentives for police officers and make it as easy as possible for them to live
It's been suggested that one way to address the issue with police officers is to shift some of the money in the city budget from the fire department side of the public safety budget to the police side. I believe the fire is a little higher right now. Is that something you would consider, a shift within public safety of resources?
Yeah. So, we have to do this comprehensive review of every single department throughout the city, and those are decisions that we'll make in the weeks, months, and frankly in the years to come as well. But it's not just a matter of public safety. It's we have serious challenges throughout the city. We also have the schools and the infrastructure issues and the curriculum and the education issues. We have city services as well. I'll tell you one very great piece of advice that I've received from Mayor Taveras. He said that remember that a decision to do something today is also a decision to not do something in 6 months. And you don't know what kind of opportunities will present themselves. So, be very careful about what you decide to do and what you decide not to do, because it's going to have consequences down the line. And, decisions such as that, you can only do them by doing a comprehensive review first and knowing exactly what you're working with. So those decisions will be made in the weeks to come.
What are your legislative priorities for your first year? What bills are you going to push on Smith Hill? What's important to you there?
Yeah, the same thing. I've talked a great deal about the car tax here in Providence. The way that it's structured, cities and towns have very little flexibility in that area. So that a couple of years ago, when the car tax was imposed, because there's no flexibility at the municipal level, cars below 24,000, they actually saw a tax increase. But cars above 24,000, they saw a tax decrease. And so some flexibility so that cities and towns can structure their car tax.
Well, you want to change how they're valued, right? Is that
exactly.
And you now think that you need the General Assembly's help to make that happen?
Yeah, that's all state law. Okay. And right now, every day when I'm out there talking to people.
Well, I think when we were in the debate, didn't you tell me you
That's
thought
why
you could
I
do it outside of state law?
You can. No. It's part of state law. So state law right now allows you to take a uniform percentage of the total value. So you can decrease the value, but it has to be uniform. What I want to get to is where if you have a $500 car, the city values it at $500. If you have a $10,000 car, it's valued at $10,000. Just like with our homes, they're valued at what they would go for on the market. But right now, they're valued by the state on what they would be fresh off of the lot. And as I'm talking to people throughout the city, day after day, they tell me that they have an old $500 or $600 junker that they're paying taxes on as if the car was worth $2,500. Not only is it a new tax on people, but it's a slap in the face. People tell me all the time, look, if the city says it's worth $2,500, give me less than that, and I'll sell it to the city. So that's an issue of just fundamental fairness that we have to address, and we need state partners for that.
People are so frustrated as well with the condition of the city's roads. I know you're going to say again you have to review and everything else, but do you think that's something that you could make serious changes to in like your first year that might see an improvement? And anything specific you're thinking about?
Oh, absolutely. And this is where, I'm eager to roll up my sleeves and get into the weeds. But the Department of Public Works, we haven't had a permanent director there for over 2 years. And, there are a number of things that we can do. Nothing kills me more than when you see, a freshly paved road that's starting to get cut into from a public utility company or another. We have to coordinate with our public utility agencies throughout the state so that we can prevent this happening. Make sure they get in there before we pave the road. Those are things that we can do and that we can prevent. Also, once they do cut into the road, they already have the responsibility to fill the hole and to maintain it for a couple of years. But oftentimes they do a shoddy job and someone has to be on top of them to make sure they come back. We need someone overlooking that and supervising it. And those are all steps that we can take at the city. If we're proactive about it and we're collaborative, we can do it in a way that provides better roads at less cost. And that's the kind of approach that we need to take.
All right, Providence Mayor-elect Jorge Elorza, I want to thank you very much for joining us. By the way, what sports teams do you root for? I think the people deserve to know that. 20 seconds.
That's very important. Season ticket holder for the New England Patriots. Right. I waited on the waiting list for 10 years, so I'm a big fan.
That's impressive.
I'm also a season ticket holder for the Providence Friars. I'm a URI fan, so I apologize to all my URI folks, but I'm a big
go.
PC
He loves
fan.
all our sports
and
teams.
I love all the local teams.
See you next week on Newsmakers.
I'm a big sports fan.
See?